And we have an exclusive interview now with a very close friend of Shahzada Dawood, who you will know by now. I'm sure you've heard that name many times in the last few days, because Shahzada was one of the people who was in the submersible, in the Titan, which went down to the wreck of the Titanic, and so sadly lost his life. His son was there as well, so there were two members of the family of the 5 men who lost their lives, Shahzada and his son Suleman. And now we are going to talk from Pakistan, actually, to Osman Waheed, who was a close friend of Shahzada Dawood. And I'm delighted that he is with us, and actually the family have agreed for Osman to speak to us, because we don't want to intrude into anybody's grief. We don't want to make sensationalist headlines about any of this. But we do want to get to the core of the story here on TalkTV. Osman, you're very welcome to TalkTV this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say on behalf of every single person in this building that I am, and I'm sure everybody watching and listening to this programme, that we are deeply, deeply sorry for your loss. It is a horrendous thing, and I really appreciate you speaking to us today about what has happened.
Thank you, and I'm very grateful for that. It was a horrific tragedy, and Shahzada meant so much to so many people. It'll take us a long time to get over this.
What have the last few days been like for you? What did you know when? Just talk us through your experience.
So, it completely came out of the blue. Shahzada and I live in different countries now, so we are in touch from time to time, but I didn't know that he was embarking on this adventure with Suleman. They're a lovely family, one of the most tightly knit families I've ever had the pleasure of knowing and being friends with. Our kids went to school together when they lived in Lahore, and Shahzada and Christine are some of our closest friends. So it came as a shock. I mean, I could not have imagined that this kind of tragedy would strike two really lovely people. I know that Shahzada was always. I've been friends with him for almost 20 years now. We actually met on an airplane. On a flight from Pakistan to Buenos Aires in Argentina. And we're both deeply private people, but it was a friendship that was immediate and long-lasting. And what I'd like to sort of tell you about Shahzada is, and a lot of this has been said already, but he was a deeply curious person. Intellectually, he was keen to find out more about the planet, and beyond, about the universe. So as you may know, he was on the board of the SETI Institute in the US, and he was also a very deeply humane person.
He was very concerned, he was very interested in the social impact of a lot of these organisations that he was on the board of, and he was someone who'd been very successful in his life as well. I wonder, you talked about the curiosity, the intellectual curiosity, this sort of spirit of adventure, essentially, that presumably was part of what led him to the decision to get on that vessel.
No, that's for sure. So, whenever I would be in touch with the family, particularly over summer holidays, they'd either be visiting Antarctica, watching a volcano in Iceland, or looking at the Northern Lights, or on safari in Africa. In fact, a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe 4 years ago, I happened to be in Beirut in Lebanon on a business trip. And I ran into Shahzada and the kids and Christine in the lobby of a hotel in Beirut. They were there to, do a tour of the country and visit the ancient relics in Lebanon. So that's just the kind of love for adventure all of them shared amongst each other.
Tell me about Shahzada's son as well, Suleman. You mentioned him. You said that, I think you were saying your daughter went to school with him. He was just 19 years old. There have been reports, anyway, I don't know whether these are true or not, and I wonder what you know about it, if anything, that he was terrified by the trip, that an aunt of Suleman said he was very not into doing it, were her apparent words. But Shahzada was trying to encourage him to do so. I wonder what you make of that, what your reaction to that is.
So, Shahzada and I both have 2 children, a boy and a girl. So my son, who's 20, is just a little bit older than Suleman. And, from that age, Suleman was as adventurous as his dad was. He was always climbing trees, running around barefoot in the garden. And I cannot imagine. So if I were to describe the relationship between father and son, and in fact all 4 of them, there are two things that really, stood out. One is the unabashed love that they have for each other. And the other one was the sheer irreverence with which they treated each other. So Shahzada and Christine would make fun of each other. The kids would make fun of the parents. But they had that really close relationship in which they could say anything to each other. So there's no world that I can imagine in which, Suleman would express this kind of reservation and Shahzada and Christine would not listen. I just really don't see that happening.
There are so many questions which the world has, and I'm sure that you have, as a friend of this family, as a friend of Shahzada. What is uppermost in your mind? I'm sure you're just coping with your grief. You're dealing with these incredible, extraordinary, pretty much unprecedented events. But just talk us through, really, for you, the last few days and the questions you still have, because I know I have many, just as someone watching this, but as someone so deeply invested in the friendship with this family, there must be so many things you want to know.
Yeah, no, so I know that every adventure has its risks, and this for sure was not without risks. In an ideal world, they would have gone down, had this amazing adventure, and come back and told their family and immediate friends about it. As I said, Shahzada was not somebody, nor Suleman, who would be into the spectacle of things. They did it, they undertook adventures for the sake of the adventure itself. It seems to be now from the news that when the accident took place, it happened very quickly and probably earlier on in the journey, which is, I guess, in retrospect, something to be grateful for, that they didn't go through this long period of pain and anguish that everybody around them who loved them and didn't know what was going on went through. But for sure, I mean, with these adventures, there needs to be a lot more regulatory tightening around approving, submersibles, the vehicles in which they go down, these journeys themselves. There needs to be some oversight on exactly what kind of risks people are allowed to take, and some risks that nobody should be allowed to take.
Shahzada was someone...
it's very easy to... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm sure I don't mean to be in any way disrespectful to Shahzada, to his family, to his memory. And I know that is something that you will absolutely have at the forefront of your mind, both now and in the future. I think a lot of people are talking about the regulation, the safety of all of this. Surely Shahzada is someone who was a very wealthy person, as someone who had resources, as someone who was, as you say, a very intellectually curious and intelligent person. Do you think he would have made sure or educated himself about the risks here? Because some of the risks, let's face it, were known about this vessel.
I think to the extent possible, he must have. Pakistan is some of the highest mountains in the world. And I know many people who climb K2 or go to Everest on father and son trips. And those are also extremely dangerous undertakings in themselves. All you can do is try to take the maximum precautions possible. And at some level, especially when you're dealing with a vehicle or an equipment of this nature, you have to trust the person who's offering these journeys. And, so that trust, I suppose, was there.
What do you think the family will do now in terms of this? Will there be legal action? Will there be further questions to be asked here? Clearly they are grieving at the moment. I'm sure that will continue, and they will want to make sure that both Shahzada and Suleman are remembered and commemorated properly, and I'm sure there will continue to be global interest in that. But as time goes on, surely there will be people who will want answers and will presumably use the resources of the family to get those answers from OceanGate.
So, I can't speak on their behalf on that issue, but what I do know is that the family's top priority will be to continue the legacy that Shahzada left behind. And it was truly a wonderful legacy. He was a deeply humane person. What they did for education and health in Pakistan, I'm in the healthcare industry. And Shahzada and Christine, very, very quietly, have helped so many patients who will never, ever know their names, never know who helped them. And you know about Shahzada's love for science and Suleman's love for science fiction. But the Family Foundation has actually set up the first science museum in Pakistan. And it's a museum that rivals any science museum you'd see in London or in New York or in Boston. And those are gifts to the people of Pakistan that this family has very sort of carefully not just invested in, but curated,
Yes.
just so that they could share that curiosity and that love for knowledge that they had with their fellow citizens.
And that is an incredible legacy that will live for so many years. Have you spoken to Christine? How is she coping?
I have. She was still on the ship. Obviously, it's an extremely difficult time. But what I can tell you is she's extremely brave, as is Alina, and that quirky sense of humor, ultimately that they always had. The four of them had between each other. It will come back, and they'll be able to find some positives in this horrific tragedy. The fact that Shahzada and Suleman ultimately suffered as little as possible, and the beautiful legacy. Is that in some?
I mean, it is horrific, but is the fact that there were two scenarios here, weren't there? There was equally horrific in terms of the fact that the oxygen we thought might have been there, might have run out at one point. But actually now we know that it was a quick thing, that this did happen. Is that of any comfort to them?
If I were to be asked to pick between either of these two horrible outcomes, I would pick the quick and instantaneous one. And I'm sure anybody would, for themselves or for anybody they love deeply. So in all this tragedy, there is that one thing, I suppose, that is the saving grace, that both of them didn't get to suffer or go through that anguish that no father and son should have to go through.
Osman, you have been a friend for 20 years of Shahzada Dawood. I know you've spoken very movingly about Suleman as well, the young student, his son, who he brought on this trip. Your friend Shahzada, how do you want the world to remember him? What do you want people to know about him today?
So I want people to know that he was an individual who was exceptionally intelligent, but extremely unassuming and humble. And above all the wealth that people talk about, or the success that the family has had in business, he was just an amazing individual, somebody who was deeply empathetic, who helped whoever he possibly could, whenever he possibly could. And that's really what made him, and in fact, makes Christine and Alina very, very special people. They're just beautiful individuals.
And a great friend to you. How are you?
Yes. I'll share something very personal. A few years ago, I lost my sister to cancer. She lived in London, in fact. So I was with her in the last 3 months of her life. And if I think amongst the things that kept me sane outside my family, it was really Shahzada and Christine, who would drop everything, come by and not only just see me, but take me on drives or walk through the forest just to make sure that I was okay. And they would drop literally whatever they were in the middle of. And Shahzada, as you know, was a busy man. He was involved in a lot of things. But they pushed all of those aside when it came to friendships and to family.
Sounds like a really good man and a great friend that you had. And I know that those memories and that generosity, I'm sure, will sustain you in the days to come. Osman, thank you so much for talking to us. I really wish you well. And please know that we're all thinking about you. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was Osman Waheed there, a close friend of the Dawood family. He knew Shahzada Dawood, who died on the Titan tragedy, along with his son, Suleman Dawood. They'd known each other for 20 years. I think that was just a remarkable tribute there to someone who was clearly a very good man and a close friend to Osman. And of course, we will continue to bring you any developments in this horrendous, tragic story of the Titans.